to come in today and lead this debate between the three candidates. So, Rusty, podium.
All right. Thank you very much. Before we begin the debate, I'd like to go over the rules that we've set up, and then we'll invite the candidates to come on up. All questions will be coming from me as the moderator. No member of the audience or candidates have been given questions in advance. We will be rotating the order in which the candidates give their answers. I will ask a question, and each candidate will have 2 minutes to reply. Then there will be, first, there will be 2-minute opening statements from each candidate, and after the questions conclude, candidates will make a 2-minute closing statement. When candidates arrived today, we had 3 drawings. The first to determine the order of seat positions, and the second to determine the order of opening statements, and the last to determine the order of closing statements. Ashley Wimberly, the APA Executive Director, will be the official timekeeper. She'll be giving 1-minute warnings, 30-second warnings, and a time's up message. Candidates, please pay attention to the cards Ashley's holding as you complete your answers. I will, if you run out of time, I will let you finish your sentence unless it becomes a compound complex sentence, and then I'll ask you to stop. So, I'd like to say a special welcome to our friends in other Arkansas media who are here with us today. We have television outlets with us from across the state to cover this important event. Now, before we begin, let's get in a proper frame of mind. Please stand and welcome members of the Opera in the Ozarks to provide us with their rendition of our national anthem. Candidates, you have to follow that. So, thank you very much. That was beautiful. So, we can have the candidates come forward and take their seats.
Appreciate you tipping me off there.
Please hold your applause until the end, and then we'll give everyone a chance to show your appreciation to all of these candidates at the end. So, on the far right is Republican nominee Governor Asa Hutchinson. In the middle is the Democratic nominee Jerry Henderson, and here on my immediate right is Mr. Mark West, who's the Libertarian candidate. And we will start today with opening statements, and Mr. Governor Hutchinson.
Thank you, Rusty, and it's good to be with the Press Association. Thanks for hosting this forum today. And first, let me extend my great sorrow about the Capital Gazette and the employees that were killed in that incident, which I see as an attack on the First Amendment and the freedom of the press. And and it is certainly not something that we want in our society. I appreciate all that you do for journalism, for covering the news, and for supporting the First Amendment. In terms of this race for governor, I've had the privilege of serving two presidents. President Reagan as United States Attorney and President Bush and his administration serving the 3rd District in Congress. But there's not been a higher privilege that I've had than to be governor of the state of Arkansas. And you start off with the promises that you uttered 4 years ago. I said I wanted to do 3 simple things. I wanted to have a $100 million income tax cut. We did that. I said that we wanted to have computer coding in every high school. We did that, and we moved to the top of the nation in computer science education. I said that I wanted to be the jobs governor. We've created over 60,000 jobs with the jobs announcements even today across the state of Arkansas. But running for re-election is about the future. And if you look at the future, we're going to continue the path of improving education, from job skill training to our reading initiative to our STEM education. We're going to continue the path for competitive tax rates in Arkansas. We're going to transform state government as we've been working on over the last 4 years to continue that path of reorganization. We're going to look at infrastructure and have a highway bill that will make sure that we can have economic growth in the future. I look forward to the conversation today.
All right. Thank you, Governor. The next opening statement will come from Mr. Mark West.
Well, I also want to begin by thanking the Arkansas Press Association for having us here. Let me get that on. Thank you guys for putting this together, and I appreciate you guys for including the libertarians. So often we don't get included. I really appreciate the opportunity to get to present an alternative. I am a kind of a press guy myself. I graduated from Arkansas State University with a degree in radio and television broadcasting. So when I saw the news of the tragedy, it was very tough to deal with, because that's one of the fears that we all have. Even in my job, I work in an office, and I'm alone with a back to a glass door. So every day I think about that when I walk into my office, because we get disgruntled employees and disgruntled clients, and it's something that stays on all of our minds. But one of the things I want to do is introduce myself. I've been a pastor for 15 years. I run the corporate office for a multi-state heavy industrial construction company for 10 years. We are in the power industry, working on power plants. We also do steel mills and paper mills, and I'm basically one of the central cogs that makes sure everything we have going on all over the country works and gets billed properly, and all our employees get paid. So I know how to do the work and put my nose to the grindstone. One of the reasons I decided to run is I want to see Arkansas become the destination state for jobs and families. And when I look at our state, I see so many counties in our state falling behind. I think we have this economy with a lot of jobs, but we've got a lot of people still qualifying with those jobs for things like Arkansas Works and food stamps. So we need to address that and bring the economy up for everybody, not just 7 counties. And I hope that we get to talk about that some today. And I thank you guys so much for having me here, and I'm looking forward to the conversation we're going to have.
All right. Thank you, Mr. West. We'll move on to our next opening statement, and this will come from Jared Henderson. Mr. Henderson.
Thank you very much. And it is an honor to be here with you all today and to be on stage with Governor Hutchinson and Mark West. I'd like to echo their sentiments about the events in Annapolis this week. Put it very simply, we would not have our democracy and all of our other rights without the courage and integrity and the work that you all do. So thank you all for that. I'm just thrilled and excited to be here to participate in this debate. When I was growing up in Arkansas, we called ourselves the land of opportunity. And it was that for me and for my family. 2 generations ago, my grandmother was born in a town called Wiltroff and went to the 8th grade twice because there was no high school. A generation later, my parents, although they didn't get to go to college, they did get to complete high school, and they got to invest in me. And I got to grow up in a wonderful community. I got to attend great public schools. I got to grow up in a town that was experiencing economic prosperity, that had hope, and it set me up for tremendous opportunities. I've been able to spend the first couple decades of my career working, starting out at NASA, working for one of the top business firms in the world. I've got to spend most of the last decade in public education. around the country and in the Delta and the southern part of our state. And it's given me great hope and the opportunity that lies before us in the future of the state. But we need to start with an honest assessment of where we are. And we have had some great progress to celebrate. But earlier this year, I listened like all of you did to the governor's State of the State address, and he declared that the state of our state was stronger than ever before. And I think there's a case to be made that in Bentonville and in Fayetteville, in some neighborhoods in Little Rock and elsewhere in the state, that's true. But in far too many communities, it's simply not. But it could be in the future. If we make the right investments in education, if we think boldly not just about recruiting big business in, but building small business from the ground up, we can build a prosperous future, not just in a few pockets of the state, but everywhere. That's why I'm running.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop for just a moment so we can get some water delivered to the candidates. Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to the questions now, and we will. Each candidate will get the opportunity to answer this question and respond to it, but we will change the order in which the candidates answer. The first question will be answered first by Governor Hutchinson. And Governor, this is the question. Arkansas voters will consider issue 1 in the fall general election, proposed amendment to the state constitution that would cap damages in civil litigation, limit attorneys' contingency fees, and make it easier for the legislature to change the rules regarding legal proceedings. Proponents of the amendment say it would protect defendants from frivolous lawsuits and improve the state's business climate. Opponents say it will limit access to the judicial system and make potential defendants less accountable for bad acts or negligence. How will you vote on issue 1 and why?
Thank you, Rusty. And in terms of issue 1, I was not thrilled with the exact language of that amendment. I've always been a supporter of tort reform. I thought these caps were more constrained than they should be. So I have not announced my position on that. I do intend to announce my position later this fall as to how I would vote on that. I think it is helpful to have tort reform in Arkansas with limitations on damages at some level for business recruitment purposes, as well as for our medical community in terms of what they're trying to do and have a practice of medicine and in our rural communities. But I'm going to look at that more closely and state my position more clearly on that this fall.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Henderson. You have 2 minutes.
Well, in many issues where law intersects with medicine, it gets very complicated. But in this case, as I've studied this issue, not just with legal minds, but also with people in the medical community. My wife is a surgeon and owns a medical practice. It's pretty clear and easy for me to be against this measure. I think that one of the most important things that we need to focus on in healthcare is how do we make it more affordable. And I think that smart, constructive tort reform could be a way to do that. But this bill isn't it. This bill invests more power in the legislature, which I would be against regardless of which party controlled it. It raises the possibility that we're going to make political things that should just be more medical and legal. And so I think there are better ways to do this. An easy look at other states around the country have shown examples where you can have independent commissions that can remove politics and decrease the number of frivolous lawsuits without decreasing the healthy accountability that we need in our medical system. So I'm against it.
All right. Thank you. Mr. West, you have 2 minutes.
One of the things that means a lot to libertarians and people that come from our philosophy is this concept of the separation of powers. And one of the things that this tort reform, the way it's worded and the way it's written, it really violates the concept of the separation of powers. You have a judicial system for a reason, and you have a legislative branch for a reason, and you have the executive branch for a reason. Each of them has their own function. And unfortunately, what this does, and what it would do, is take way too much of the decision-making away from the judicial system and move it into the legislative branch, where it can be politicized, where things can be used to pick winners and losers, because that's what's often happening with our state legislature. And one of the things that makes our country great and amazing is this fact that we have a separation of powers, that that if you have a problem with the law or you are at odds, you have the judicial system to go into to find that redress, to find that help. So I see it as overreach, and I'm not afraid to go ahead and take a stand against issue 1 today. I am in opposition.
All right. Thank you. We'll move on to our second question. Mr. Henderson, you'll get to start with this one. Arkansas now requires recipients of Medicaid to be working or seeking employment to continue in the program. Do you support the concept of work requirements for this program, and if so, how would you change for the current system for the better? And if not, will you actively work to repeal these work requirements?
So I think work requirements have been shown in the past to be effective when it comes to some types of government assistance. If you look at the 1990s, we had bipartisan legislation that did produce constructive progress, getting more people into the workforce that should have been there. I'm not for the proposals that apply this to Medicaid, though. And for a simple reason, you can only comply with these benefits right now through online processes. And Arkansas ranks 49th in internet connectivity. And our people that are receiving Medicaid are some of our most vulnerable citizens. They're precisely the people that it's going to be hardest to reach these compliance measures, even if they're doing everything right. And when we restrict Medicaid, we're not just pulling health care away from certain people, we're depriving our hospitals of revenue streams, things that in many of our rural counties are helping keep the doors open. And so I think this is bad policy, and I think that we need to walk it back.
All right. Thank you. Mr. West, 2 minutes.
One of the big issues that I've had 2 major issues with Arkansas Works and the way that it's been sold in our state. The first problem that I have is the reliance on federal money that it's going to require. We don't have a guarantee that the federal government is going to continue to put that money into our state. They say they will now, but we don't have that guarantee. So what happens if one day we get an administration in that decides, you know what, this is really a bad idea, we want to cut our federal budget, so we're going to stop, we're going to cut this expansion, this Medicaid expansion money from going to states. Then what happens? Well, you've got states that were depending on that money that suddenly have a huge shortfall. And what's going to happen at that point is taxes are going to have to increase. It's the only way to make that shortfall up. The second problem I have with it is when I really look at it principally, it sounds to me a lot like it's just another corporate subsidy. And a lot of you people are going to say, well, a corporate subsidy, this is for people with Medicaid. Yes, but if you are working in this economy, why are you dependent on Medicaid? You should have a job that's good enough to support your health care. And you should have employers that care enough about you and your future to make sure you've got enough money to pay for your health care. They shouldn't be dependent on the state. They shouldn't be dependent on the federal government to supplement your salary by taking care of your health care. So for those 2 principal reasons, I do oppose this work option in Arkansas Works.
All right. Thank you. Governor, 2 minutes.
The work requirement is very important as to the direction we need to go in economic development, but more importantly, training people who have been generationally or for other means insufficient education and training to be employable. And whenever you have one of the lowest unemployment rates in our country's history, whenever you need, employers are really needing workers to be trained, to put a work requirement on able-bodied Medicaid recipients is the right thing to do. It is not punitive, but it is designed to move them into worker training, to move them into work and higher employed jobs. And if they cannot have 20 hours of work or training, they can be volunteering in a community organization. And so this is the right direction for Arkansas. I appreciate Jared being very clear that he opposes this. I think the work requirement is important for the values that we represent in Arkansas. If you're able-bodied, contribute. And we had one person that had a work requirement, and he was able to, for the first time, move into GED, to get his GED so he is employable. That's the kind of progress that we want to have in Arkansas. And so what we've done is we are the first state to implement this work requirement. We're working hard to implement it in a way that rewards work and helps people move up that economic ladder. It's going to be challenging because this is a process issue, but to Mark's point about in terms of the cost of it, what we have done with our Medicaid expansion population is to manage it in a way that gets the most help to people who are trying to do better in their life and they're struggling, and to keep that program alive. And I think we're taking the right steps to manage it and get it done.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to the next question. Mr. West, you'll get the first word. Governor Hutchinson has proposed cutting the top individual tax rate in Arkansas from 6.9% to 6%. That's been indicated it could save taxpayers $180 million. Meanwhile, the legislature's tax reform task force has sent the governor's plan and 2 other income tax reduction proposals to be reviewed. Which of these approaches, if any, do you favor? And if you do favor one, how should we pay for the tax cut?
Well, to start off, I favor tax cuts as long as we can get them and they're not couched as revenue neutral. Arkansas has a high tax problem, but that high tax problem stems from a spending problem that we have at the state capitol. I propose instead that we put together a committee on spending and taxation that I call costs, because we have to deal with the spending side of what's going on at the state capitol. And what this committee would do would be a group of volunteers that would examine everything we're doing in our state government, looking for where departments have overlap, where we have redundancy, where we have inefficiency, and finding ways to make our state government more efficient and making it where we can spend less as a state government. And then as we cut that spending, we'll be able to cut taxes and eventually eliminate the income tax altogether. Libertarians are known for throwing around the phrase, taxation is theft, and we do believe taxation is theft. And one of the things that I would like to see done is us build up our communities to the point where we don't need so many of the programs coming out of the state level. But that's going to take us all getting involved in rural Arkansas, getting involved in the Delta. I grew up in the Delta. I graduated from West Memphis High School in the Blue Devil. I watched my daddy get up at 5 a.m. and go to work and come home at 6 o'clock every night, working hard hours, working long hours just to keep a roof over our heads, and watching the poverty that was around us in West Memphis where I grew up. We've got to get back into these communities, these counties where the population is decreasing, and we're really going to get serious about returning money to the people. Part of that is going to come when we really get involved in these communities and they're able to pull themselves up because we're engaged in businesses and different things on the local level.
All right. Thank you. Governor.
Well, I'm pleased when you mentioned West Memphis to say that today Big River Steel announced that they are going into phase 2 and expanding and going to create 500 new jobs in the Delta region of our state. Average pay will be $75,000 each. That's the kind of progress I like to see in the state of Arkansas. When it comes to the tax cuts, that's important that we have a more competitive income tax rate in Arkansas, and that's been my singular focus in terms of tax cuts. And that's why we've had 2 rounds of tax cuts, $100 million and $50 million, targeting those low-income and middle-income individuals. We want to flatten that rate to get it down to 6% so we can start being more competitive, keep capital, keep industry here, and attract more industry. When you ask how you pay for it, well, just like the $150 million in income tax we already had, we were able to do that through growth, absorbing it in our growing economy, and managing our state budget. We have 1,400 fewer state employees now than when I became governor. That's through transformation efforts, efficiency efforts, and managing state government well. That saves us money, and then as our economy grows, we bring in more money. So the $180 million that tax cut will reduce revenue, will come through our transformation efforts. It will come through our economic growth and our efficiency efforts in state government. And so it is doable, it is workable, it's something that we must do. And look back over the last 3.5 years, we've had tax cuts, but we have increased teacher pay twice. We have built a $50 million new prison that was necessary. We've been able to continue our Medicaid expansion under Arkansas Works with the reform because we've managed it well and met essential services as well as having these tax cuts.
Right. Thank you. Mr. Henderson.
Yes. So I'm glad that we've seen the previous rounds of tax relief for middle middle class and lower income Arkansans. I think that's a good investment and it'll produce a good return. I don't think when we're talking about investment that an additional round of tax cuts for the most affluent Arkansans makes the most sense. I'm like all of you. I would like my taxes to be as low as possible, but when we're thinking about the future of the state and investments we can make, I think there are better ways to spend the money. You know, and when the governor was talking about Medicaid, and he told the story about the young man that got his GED, you know, those are good stories that we should celebrate, and they're inspiring. But I simply don't believe that access to health insurance, access to Medicaid, is what's holding people back from this, or what's going to push people in. When I look at what's holding people back from getting into the workforce and making their biggest opportunity, it's the lack of enough teachers. It's the lack of great educators. And when I look at what's holding people back, it's generational poverty that starts when 14 and 15-year-olds become parents. And they do so at a higher rate in the state than anywhere else in the country. We can do something about this. You know, $180 million, that's enough to give every teacher in this state about a $5,000 raise. And I don't think that we should blanket hand that money out, but it does illustrate the point that we have the resources to make some transformative investments that will really help all of our citizens reach their full potential and reach their dreams no matter where they live. But I think we need to be thoughtful about which investments will return the highest yield. We can put more money back in the hands of the most affluent citizens, or we can invest in helping people that need better access to pre-K, that need access to high-speed internet that don't have it yet. We can invest some of that money in our roads and bridges. These will also increase our competitiveness, and I think they'll go further than the alternative.
All right. Thank you. We'll move on to the next question, and Governor, you will you'll get to start. And just so happens the next question is about teacher pay. Mr. Henderson has discussed making Arkansas one of the top states in the nation for teachers, and has talked about making significant increases in teachers' pay as part of that goal. How do you respond to Mr. Henderson's comments and his plan? And we'll go from there.
Well, when it comes to teachers, I value teachers. They made a critical difference to everything from our computer coding initiative to our reading initiative. And so that's the reason that while other states have teachers protesting because no pay increases, under my administration, we have increased teacher pay twice, every time we've had a general session of the legislature. And we have to continue to invest in our teachers. I was delighted to see statistics that the entering teachers into the profession have actually increased under the last 3 years under my administration. I hope it's because we're showing them respect and rewarding them in the classroom. But if you look at the future, I've looked at how we compare with our surrounding states, and I will commit and announce today that I want to have a goal of increasing the minimum teacher salary in Arkansas for those with a bachelor's degree, which is now around 22,000, to increase it. I'm sorry, it's higher than that, but I want to be able to increase it 13% so that it goes up to $36,000. And so with that, over the next 4 years, that would put Arkansas as the highest paid for teachers in the region of all of our surrounding states. That is an important goal for our state. I'm committed to make sure that we can raise that minimum teacher salary. Of course, that does not reflect what they're making on average, but that is the minimum starting salary. It has increased 23%, or this will increase at 23%, and that will make the increase 23% since 2015. So I'm committed to raising that minimum teacher salary to $36,000 while I'm governor of Arkansas.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson?
Yes. Well, I'm happy to hear that announcement. One of the consequences of being a new figure in the political arena is that you have no problem celebrating ideas, even when they sometimes come from your opponent. But I think that investing in teachers is the single most important thing that we can do for the next generation. We are living in the most dynamic and rapid and expansive period of change in human history. And if this state is not just going to catch up and get ahead, we need to recognize that we need to have a great educator in every single classroom. That person needs to have the training and resources they need. And we need to get out of their way. Compensation is one part of this, and I'm glad that we're seeing some movement on that front. But we need to look holistically at the experience of our educators. We need to keep the best people we have and attract the best people in. Pay is a huge part of that. And I think we can go even further over the next 10 years, and we must. And we can if we address some of our other problems, like our childhood poverty rate. It can free up a lot of money to invest in our educators. But we need to start by listening to them, understanding their concerns around compensation, but also their concerns about their day-to-day experience. Over the last 20 years, from Washington on down, we have tried, with increasing new systems and bureaucracy, to manage our teachers to success. And what we've ended up doing is we've been separating them from their kids. We've been having them spend more and more time on paperwork, less and less time on training, more and more time satisfying the needs of Little Rock and Washington, and less figuring out how they build relationships with their students. You know, in the first year of my administration, one of the most powerful and simplest things we could do is just stop and turn off some of the regulations that have buried our teachers, starting with some of the evaluation and testing system. These are things that are in our power. We could give our teachers hours back a week. We could start the process of returning to them the respect that they need and deserve. If we can achieve this, we can create opportunity in every zip code in the state.
All right, thank you. Mr. West?
You know, all of us, I don't really believe there's a single person sitting at this table up here that doesn't value what teachers bring to our students, what they bring to the classroom. I remember growing up, I had a teacher named Miss Minnis when I was in high school in West Memphis, and I thought she was the hardest, meanest teacher you could ever face. But she taught advanced English, and she taught me more about what it meant to actually put in hard work. You know, I'd never had a teacher challenge me to actually put an effort into my work, and she instilled in me a work ethic that I still have today. I mean, I work 2 jobs, and I'm running a campaign for governor. I haven't slowed down since I took her class, and I'm trying to instill that same thing in my children. So we all value teachers. The question is, what about these areas, these small rural areas in the eastern part of Arkansas, and the southern part of Arkansas, where, you know, it's just not logistically feasible to put teachers? How about we take some of the money that we're looking and start working on infrastructure, building infrastructure, getting internet, Wi-Fi, those type of things into these small rural school districts. And you know, we've watched medicine begin to advance where you have these telehealth systems where doctors are there online to deal with you and they can interact with you. Why don't we expand the teacher's ability to touch students, especially those that are great, and incorporate that so that we can get schools back into local communities? I pastor in Oiltrough. It is a town that has dried up since the school that was there left. There are no kids there. And we're destroying our communities by centralizing everything. We've got to get back into our communities, and I think we can use the technology we have to get back into these communities to get schools back into areas where the need is, and get these great teachers and these great minds into those classrooms so that maybe there'll be more teachers like Ms. Minnis out there talking to instead of the 30 or so we had in the classroom, talking to thousands of kids, because we're able to get her there electronically and through technology, so we can build the future, build a bunch of hardworking people for the next generation.
All right. Thank you. We'll move on to the next question. Mr. Henderson, you'll get to start. In the light of the scandals that have resulted in the conviction of 4 former Arkansas lawmakers for taking bribes and kickbacks for legislative favors and actions, what is your opinion on what needs to change related to legislative rules and ethics rules and restore faith in state government?
Well, I think this is one of the most important topics that we could take on in this debate, obviously in light of what's going on, and just given the fact that trust in government is just essential for a well-functioning state, for a well-functioning country. And I believe that, you know, a candidate should campaign in the same manner that they would lead if elected. And, you know, in response to this, my campaign has looked at this issue seriously. We have put out 7 concrete proposals that attempt not only to address some of the shortcomings in ethics rules that have led to some of the breaches that we've seen recently, but also that try to go further to create a healthier culture in our politics more generally. You know, we put out proposals, for example, that attempt to regulate dark money, which we all are victims of when we turn on our TV during election season. I think this is what we need to do, and I appreciate that we've seen a few small measures from the Senate. I look forward to hearing what the governor thinks about this and what he proposes when he releases that. But there are some very simple things that we can do to increase accountability and the penalties for people that breach this, to increase transparency, to make sure that further breaches don't occur, and to create a healthier and more transparent culture in our broader political and election process.
All right. Mr. West.
Well, when this news started coming out, the first thing that came to my mind was we really need to make sure we have transparency and accountability in the way our state government functions and in all of our government officials. One of the things that I was disappointed was that the proposals that we're seeing right now are all Senate rules and basically the police policing the police. We really need to put teeth, and we really need laws that address this. This state legislature fought tooth and nail against real ethics legislation that was pushed last session. They didn't want it. They fought it, and they won. And now look at the results we have. We have, people are comparing Arkansas to Chicago because of the corruption that we're seeing because of what's happening with our state legislators. So what I propose is that we, and here's the problem, is anything Jared or I or Asa say, we've got to get a state legislature to pass it. We've got to get a state legislature to want to be ethical, to want to not take the kickbacks or the bribes when they're offered. But what we need to do is, number one, if you have taken a bribe, we need a bill that says if you've taken a bribe and you're caught taking a bribe for a bill, number one, you owe that bribe back to the taxpayers in Arkansas. And secondly, whatever legislation was pushed through that was impacted or affected by that bribe, it needs to be up for review and potential repeal. It is time to hold the legislatures and our state government accountable to the citizens of Arkansas. Make Arkansas government accountable. It's real simple. We elect these people, they are accountable to us, and we need just those couple of simple things. If someone's caught using bribes, they should be fined to the taxpayers the amount of the bribe. If a company is found knowingly using a bribe to get a piece of legislation through, that company should also be on the hook to pay the taxpayers back for the amount of bribe that they've done, for the amount that they've received through the legislation they put through Congress. So I believe we have to make our government accountable and transparent to the taxpayers.
Thank you. Governor.
For somebody who's been involved in public service in various ways for a long time, this is very disconcerting to me, troubling to me to see public trust breached and the lack of confidence in what's happening in state government. And so this is not a pretty picture as what we've seen with multiple legislators being convicted, investigations ongoing. Whenever you look back, someone called 2012 the year of greed. That was somebody who's pled guilty to a criminal offense. Well, 2012, I was in the private sector. And so it's important to remember that what we're investigating now, the federal authorities are investigating, cross-sects years, it cross-sects parties and administrations. And so what do you do about it? You have to first recognize it's a people problem. I mean, you can pass all the rules you want to, and you're going to have somebody violate those rules and do something wrong. And so transparency is an important part of it. But Senator John Woods passed the last ethics bill that we had. And so, I don't know that it's a legislative solution, although I can point to a couple things that can be done. We've eliminated general improvement fund funding for legislators that was subject of an abuse. We should increase the fine authority of the State Ethics Commission. Right now, the Arkansas Plant Board has more penalty authority than our Ethics Commission does. And so that's an area that can be strengthened. I've suggested that when you have PACs, that it's being abused because one person can have 20 PACs. And I think you need to eliminate the duplication of PACs controlled by one individual. These are some of the reforms that increases transparency, but it comes down to the heart and doing the right thing. And I hope that we can get back to that transparency and doing the right thing in Arkansas.
Right. Thank you. We'll move on to the next question. And Mr. West, you'll get to start. We hear continually from state highway officials that Arkansas highway funding falls far short of its demonstrated needs. This week, the Tax Reform Commission began discussing the possibility of raising taxes on cigarettes, e-cigarettes and alcohol to help fund Arkansas highways. What's your opinion about that method of funding, and what do you think should be done if those are not an appropriate? If that's not an appropriate approach?
Well, one of the things that I noticed, because I have to do my own driving. Being a libertarian third-party guy, I don't have a driver. I don't get a police escort. I have to drive these roads, and then I saw this highway patrol is now going to start getting me for getting in the left lane, and I'm trying to stay out of that right lane. I don't know if you guys have driven in that lane for very long, but you get headaches, and I'm a vertigo sufferer, so that really it doesn't do me very well to stay in that right lane for too long. Our highways need some work. They need a lot of work. And the problem is we're sitting here and we're like, well, where's all the highway money at? Isn't there supposed to be highway money built in? And we don't have enough. We've got to get more. Everything that I hear these days is, hey, we need to tax more. We need another tax. We need another fee, another tax, another fee. Well, there are a lot of us that are like, we're tired of hearing about new taxes and new fees. What are you doing with the money you've already got? That's why I keep saying we have to have a committee on spending and taxation. We have to deal with the spending problems in Little Rock so that the tax funds are available for things like highways. One of the things that I have a big problem with is we always want to tax what we consider sin items. Smoking's a sin item. Anytime we have drinking's a sin item. We like to tax people for their sin items. In New York, they tax you for a soda pop. I don't want Arkansas to be that. I want us to be a place where we're free, where we're not burdened by taxation. And I would like to see us as a place where we have no income tax, where taxes are voluntary, where you go to communities, where you go to people and raise the money you want for roads. Because most of us drive roads. Most of us won't have a problem chipping in to build more roads, but we don't want to just keep raising taxes indiscriminately and say, oh, well, we need it for roads. Well, then that money's gone. Well, we need more money for roads. Well, we're tired of that. We're really ready to see some accountability and responsibility with the money here in Arkansas. Thank you.
All right. Governor?
Well, I'll second the notion of accountability for money in Arkansas. We have an independent highway commission and an independent highway department that makes the decisions on roads, and we have a funding stream for them. They've been recognized as having a well-managed department, and I applaud them in that. We have a good partnership with them in terms of oversight now with the General Assembly. But every study that's looked at it, and I'm talking about the Highway Department, but also the General Assembly through legislative research, as well as my task force, looked at highway funding and said we're short every year, that we need $200 to $400 million more in funds. Actually, it's $400 million, but I sort of try to downplay that a little bit, more in road money to keep up with our highways in Arkansas. And it's the people over in Oil Trough that's concerned about it because it's the farm market roads. It's those roads that need to have an overlay. And so we need a new highway plan. We did a stopgap measure. We implemented the short-term highway plan that put $50 million more of money into highways 2 years ago. That's worked well. It's helped. But it hasn't been the long-term plan that's needed. And so what do you do about it? And I believe it's important that the people of Arkansas have the opportunity to vote on a highway plan. I can't think of anything more democratic, more libertarian, more Republican than to say the voters can make a decision on it. They can say yes or no. And the last time they had an opportunity to vote on a half-cent sales tax, they said yes to it. The people of Arkansas said yes to it. And that has allowed us to continue the road expansion in Arkansas. And so if they want to have an opportunity to vote on that again, then I think that is democratic, and I think that is important to have the voters be able to say yes or no on a new highway plan.
All right. Mr. Henderson.
Well, as I travel the state and I talk to thousands of voters all over, this is one of the top things that comes up over and over again: the quality of our infrastructure, the quality of our ridges and roads. And they've known for quite some time what this study has shown us, that we're not investing enough and we don't have what we need. And that's not just a quality of life issue, it's an economic competitiveness issue. I think that putting things in front of the voters and giving them a say in this is a great idea too. But I also think that we need leadership that puts some concrete ideas on the table, helps them form a perspective on the pros and cons of that, so that they can make an informed decision. That's what they're paying us for, is to take a stand on some issues and to put some concrete things down. And I think there are some things that we can do. I think it's very important that we don't raise the tax burden on middle and lower class Arkansans, but we can still create revenue streams through fuel taxes. I think that cigarette taxes could be a constructive measure, not only for the revenue they raise, but the improvement in health outcomes that we could see. These are the type of ideas that we need to explore, that we need to not be afraid to name as under consideration, and that we need to transparently communicate to the public the pros and cons, so that if and when it's put in front of them, they can make an informed decision that is best for them and best for the state.
All right, thank you. I'm told we have one more question. We have time for one more question before we move on to the closing statement. So I'm going to exercise my prerogative and ask one that's of interest in this particular room at this particular time. The state's Freedom of Information Act has been under constant legislative attack in recent years by those who want to add exemptions to what information can be made public and make it harder for citizens to access government records and observe decision-making boards and commissions meet. What is your opinion about the state's current sunshine law, and what, if any, changes need to be made? And Governor, we'll let you start.
The Freedom of Information Law was initiated by the first Republican governor of Arkansas, Winthrop Rockefeller. That's an incredible part of his legacy. It has served our state well, and I fully support it. In terms of what changes would I suggest, I'm certainly not suggesting any changes to weaken the Freedom of Information Law in Arkansas. There is a task force that is out there that is looking at any improvements in it that needs to be made, or any recommendations. Obviously, I'm interested in what that group will come out with, and I know many journalists are involved with that. I also applaud the Arkansas Senate for looking at live streaming their sessions in committee. That is an important step, and I fully support that, just in terms of increasing access and public knowledge as to what's happening in our legislative bodies. And so I think the Freedom of Information Law is important. I support it, and I'm grateful for this association that is a vigorous defender of our Freedom of Information Law and openness in government.
Thank you. Mr. Henderson.
Yes. I support the Freedom of Information Act as well, and would be very, very hesitant to do anything that would curtail the transparency and accountability that the media brings, and that private citizens are able to exercise through it. I think especially in today's culture, where we're having an increasingly vigorous debate as a country over the role of the media, I think that we, and I personally, intend to always err on the side of giving journalists and citizens more access and more transparency. I actually think that laws like this are an example of the things that make this country and our culture and the relationship between political power and citizens unique and special. And so I'm proud to support that, and would do so as governor.
All right, thank you. Mr. West.
The freedom of the press is very powerful. I mean, just look at this room today. You got all three governor candidates to sit down for their first debate because you're the press. You have that power. But one thing that we have found is this evisceration of the access to information that you should have and that people should have. What I would recommend is that our legislature record everything. If they're in committee, if they're in closed-door committee, they need to disclose that. They need to record that. We need to have access to that. But I also believe that citizen journalism needs to be protected as well. That means if you're out as a citizen and you see law enforcement interacting with other citizens, you should have a right to record that. That protects both the people that are being dealt with by law enforcement and law enforcement, because it's something that everybody can see and it gets the truth out there. We have to be as transparent as we can, especially if we're given the public trust of governance. That comes with just the understanding that there should be accountability, there should be transparency. But I also believe it extends past members of the state legislature. It extends to their families and the relationships that their families have. It extends to their staff and the relationships that their staff have. We need to know who is writing the laws that govern us, because right now we've got this scenario where you have two Arkansas. And it's not just an economic two Arkansas, where you have 7 counties getting ahead and all the other counties getting left behind. It's also, too, Arkansas is in the way our laws work. There's one set of laws for the governed, and there's another set of laws for those who are in government. And one of the ways to eviscerate that system is to open everything our state legislature does up to everybody. It should all be public information. It should all be public knowledge. And we need to empower the press and empower the citizens to know what their government's doing.
All right. We will now move on to closing statements. Again, the order was determined by a draw. And the first 2-minute closing statement will come from Mr. Mark West.
To start off, I just want to thank you guys for having us. Again, as the Libertarian here, I appreciate the opportunity. President Barack Obama talked about the air being cleaner and the seas lowering if he got elected. Now, I'm not going to promise you any of that, but I will promise you the sun will come up tomorrow. Well, we just did Annie in Batesville. I was Lieutenant Ward in the play Annie for Batesville Community Theater, and that song is stuck in my head right now. The sun will come up tomorrow if you vote Libertarian. But of those things, the things that I do want us to understand is, number one, we've got to address spending on the state level. And that's why I propose we do a committee on spending and taxation. It's great that we're looking at different ways to deal with taxation, but until we deal with the underlying problem we have with spending in the state, we're not going to get anywhere. We also have to address the two Arkansas. There is one Arkansas where most of the counties in the state are losing population, they are losing economic growth, and we've got to find a way to get the economy growing for them too. All of Arkansas needs to come up together. If we're going to be the destination state for jobs and families, not just for this generation, but for generations to come, we've got to find a way to bring the rest of the state up to meet the 7 counties that are growing and are increasing in population. And finally, we've got to have transparency in government. We've got to have accountability in our state legislature. We cannot continue to have members of our state legislature go down one by one. I mean, I dread looking at the paper every day because it seems like every other day someone else is in trouble and there's another situation and there's another item. But if you guys are at all interested in learning more about what Libertarians stand for, you go to markwest4governor.com. It's the number 4. I've got my platform, and I've got a 10-step plan that I think will make Arkansas the destination state, and it will bring jobs and families here. But the big goal is getting taxes really low for everybody, because that makes people want to come to our state and be a part of it. Thank you so much for having me here today.
Thank you, Mr. West. And I would just add that even if you dread looking at the newspaper every day, please do. Our next closing statement will come from Mr. Jared Henderson.
Well, I'd like to echo Mark's gratitude to all of you for being here, for hosting this event, and also extend that gratitude again to Governor Hutchinson and Mark for being here and exchanging ideas with me and with all of you today. You know, I've been working in education most of the last decade, and mostly in the eastern and southern portion of the state. And on the campaign trail, I've made it a purposeful choice to continue to get in classrooms and to visit schools as often as I can. And I do that for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is, not to offend anyone here, but you tend to hear some of the best questions and gain some of the greatest hope from some of the younger voters and the kids that you meet. But sometimes you get hit in the stomach a little bit when you talk to kids. And I was in a middle school in the Delta a couple months ago and finished a great Q&A session with a class, and during that discussion there was a young girl that was probably about 14 years old, and she asked me where I grew up, and I told her that I grew up in Springdale in northwest Arkansas. And she looked down and just softly said, "That's the best place to grow up." You know, that's outrageous to me because our kids shouldn't know that they're not getting a fair shot based on their zip code. But it's even more outrageous to me because it is within our power over time to do something about it. But it starts with a deep commitment to equity. It starts to making sure that we spend the most time and the most priority on places where opportunity and different types of justice are less frequent. And the ideas that I'm running on, I'm proud to weigh in and participate on the day-to-day issues, the nuts and bolts of the state, but I also think that we need leadership that sets big transformational goals, not just raising the floor, addressing minimal compensation levels, but really saying what would it take to be the best, whether that is in education, whether that is in small business creation, or whether that is breaking the back of childhood poverty. There are things that we can learn from other states and places around the world that Arkansans are fully capable of doing. But it starts with vision, it starts with leadership. That's why I'm in this campaign. Thank you for being here.
All right. Governor Hutchinson?
Thank you. I wanted to recognize for a moment Don Zimmerman, whose memorial service is being conducted as we speak. He was a friend, he was leader of the Municipal League, he was a good public servant in a certain aspect. I just wanted to salute him today before I give my closing remarks. You know, we're all concerned about Arkansas, that we all grow together. It is very important. And that's why I spent time, last night I was in Magnolia, looking at the aero defense industry in Camden and what we have in Magnolia in terms of growth, looking at Stamps, Arkansas, where I was yesterday. And so we do want to grow as a state. One of the statistics that I take a little pride in is that if you look at the unemployment numbers, when I became governor, black youth unemployment was at 33%. It is at 10.5% now. Not perfect, but that means that they have an opportunity. They have an opportunity to work. And then if you look at overall minority unemployment, went from 10% down to 5.8%. We want it to grow lower. And I believe that's what job skill training does. That's what an emphasis on our reading initiative in our schools all across the state and an equitable education does. And so when you look at the future of Arkansas, you can look at it two ways. That you know, we're not doing well, but we are doing well. We're doing incredibly well in this state. We have industries that are recruiting, coming here, growing here, from New Hampshire with Sig Sauer, with Gladfelter that came from York, Pennsylvania to Fort Smith, Arkansas. These are incredible growth opportunities that we've experienced and we will continue to experience. Whenever you look at computer coding, when I brought that initiative out, people rolled their eyes and said, "Are you kidding?" And now Arkansas is not 5th, we're not 20th, we're not 30th, we're #1 in computer science education. And this is something of great pride, and that's resulting of leadership. When you look at the fact that we're going to expand that STEM education with cybersecurity training and other initiatives in this state that will keep us moving in the right direction, progress and better hope for our children in the next generation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And folks, thank you for your attention. Please, it's tough to run for office, even if it's city council. It's certainly tough for governor, so please.
Let's have them stand together and we'll get a quick photo off
Okay,
and say,
all right.
we'll get out of the way.
All right.
All three stand together.
All right. Please. I'm going to turn things back over to Byron Taylor. So.
We done, Rusty?
Yes, we are.
Okay, again, thanks to all three of the candidates for participating today. We'd love to have you stick around for the rest of the activities, but we know you have things to do. So feel free to leave. Next up on the program is the presentation of awards for the